a greenhouse we did in Georgetown, Texas, which is about 15 miles north of Austin. And these are, in the South, this is all you need for a greenhouse. And I would assume in California this is really all you're going to need as well, because we're not expecting snow to pile up 2 and 3 foot deep on our greenhouse. So in this case, remember I told you that there's what's called a hoop house and there's what's called a high hoop. These are high hoops on purpose because it is Texas. The heat gathers in the top, and we have more heat than we do cold. Now, in a northern climate, I would assume it's much better, or I should say I'm confident, it's much better to have only a 10-foot tall. Most greenhouses, that, as far as I'm aware, have either a 10-foot or a 16-foot pitch. That's really about it. Would you concur? And if you want them taller, you just add taller sides. In this case, I have a 6-foot side wall with a 4-foot, this is just household screen, and then what I call a 2-foot knee wall. And the knee wall, in my opinion, is super important. In the northern climates, they'll take this and they'll drop it a couple of feet in the ground. They'll literally dig a trench, and if they've got the time and money, they'll do a concrete footer that goes literally 2 feet in the ground and blocks the permafrost cold. In Texas, we just run a hunk of plastic from this 2x4 down to this 2x4 and then out on the ground about 1.5 feet just to give the rain something to land on instead of just eroding the sides of the greenhouse. I mean, imagine that's 3,000 foot of catchment and it's just going to pummel the sides. If you're going to hang gutters on a greenhouse, I'm going to tell you to avoid this top area because you've got a lot of seasonal fluctuation here. In other words, for me to take this screen and shade on and off, I don't want to have to take a gutter off. You put a gutter on a greenhouse, you can put it on the floor, on the ground just as well. What we have made a habit of doing when I do these is we'll dig a French drain along both sides of the greenhouse, you know, and we'll rent an auger or a trencher and just dig it as deep as it'll go, 3 foot, 32 inches, whatever, and fill that with gravel and a drain pipe first, and then gravel on top. And then if you wanted to catch all that water, I would go back here and dig a pond and let it catch there. Some folks will make an effort of hanging a gutter here and putting just a regular water tower, you know, a water tank here. I personally, the way I do it, I couldn't imagine there being a gutter there. It would just always be in my way. Plus, I'm not sure a regular household gutter was intended to catch that much rain. I don't know. But you remember I told you guys about the bowl? This is the snippets of there. This is the standpipe. I never really got to do this, so I wanted to force it in on this slideshow. Everyone here has at least heard of the bell siphon, right? Well, understand this. It's pretty much widely... Really? How many people have heard of a bell siphon? Okay, thank you. Bell siphons, it's pretty much universally agreed that bell siphons are better suited for small systems. They work great up to about 8 foot. What happens is a bell siphon, and I'll skip how a bell siphon works or whatever. I'm just going to tell you why they don't work in a large-scale environment. They work too well. They're based on flow rate, and the flow rate is what it is when you first build the system. And you'll dial your bell siphon in, and there's different size hoses and different size pipes in between, and there's all these rules that makes bell siphons work. I could tell you all day about how to make them work, and then I'm going to tell you at the end of the day, don't bother with them. So we'll skip how to make them work. I'm just going to tell you this. Everybody will say, well, my bell siphon quit working. That's a false statement. That's a misunderstanding. Bell siphons either work or they don't work. What happened is your flow rate changed. So you either built the bell siphon right or you didn't. Bottom line is, if you do get it right, they will drain the side, so the bed floods evenly, but the bell siphon drains the drain side so fast that it starts the bell siphon back up, and this half of the bed never even made it past all the roots, through all the worm poops and all the worms, and past everything to get to that drain. So what's happening is the drain end's sitting here going to town, up and down, and this side's just flooded. Not the end of the world, but that's not the point of even building a bell siphon. The bell siphon's intention is to flood and drain or ebb and flow these beds. This standpipe is how we do that. And really, this is what's called a perforated standpipe. You can't tell there's actually 4 holes. There's 2 and 2 and then 2 and 2. This perforated standpipe is the old hydroponic standby. This is the way they've done it since they decided to do it. We simply drill 4 holes in the bottom. These are each 1/4 inch holes, so I have a total of about 1 inch of holes draining into this 1.5 inch pipe that, remember, I said just sits on top of a 1.5 inch bulkhead. For those of you who actually played with the bulkhead that I had out today, and I did bring it, and we're going to, hopefully John's going to, if I can spare the questions and spare my over comments, we're going to try to get John to demonstrate how he does his liner uniseals, which is, as far as I know, John's creation. But the bulkheads that we played with today, if you recall, have a slip inside. And someone had asked me, how do you glue that? Or how do you get the pipe to attach to this bulkhead? I told them, you just glue it. Well, in this scenario, you wouldn't glue it. You want your bell siphon to be removable, I mean your standpipe, so that you can access it and clear out roots and whatnot. Again, it's not if these few little holes get clogged, but when. So this shows the bulkhead just sitting on that, how convenient. Just sitting there like that, see? And when I move it, there's just a tiny little shelf right there. And I came across this on accident. I have to give credit where it's due. My helper that day, I said, well, I'm going to go get a threaded mail, because if you imagine, those are threaded bulkheads. And I used to put a threaded mail on there, and I would screw it all the way down, and then I would drill the holes as low as I could in the threaded mail adapter. It's not a bulkhead. And I would always tell people, whatever you do, don't screw that thing too tight, because it's going to weld itself shut, and you won't be able to check it. And so I had gone to the tool shed to find a threaded mail adapter so that I could do what I was talking about. And I came back, and the helper had already drilled 4 holes and sat it in there and turned the pump on, and the thing was flooding already. And I said, what did you do? And he says, oh, I put it in like you said to. And I was like, threw the threaded mail adapter across the greenhouse, and that's how we're doing it from now on. In other words, I learned I don't need the mail adapter. Depending on the bulkhead choice, you may or may not still need to do a threaded adapter. I'll talk more about that later. This is the media guard, and this is what keeps the media from just clogging up your holes. So this goes around this. The way we do this is in this case, is just cheap 4-inch Schedule 20 PVC, and you'll see, maybe you can see that I drew a couple of lines on here. See? Just as a guide, and then I take a chop saw or a miter saw, and I sit there and I go like this. It makes a huge fuzzy mess, and if you're not holding the thing right, it'll bounce and throw plastic at you. But with some diligence and some patience, you can get them perfect. Does it need to be perfect like that? No. The one thing I want to warn you about is don't take this piece of PVC and drill a ton of 1/4-inch holes in it and say, that's pretty cheddared out, it's going to drain. Well, what does it take to block a hole that big? 1 pebble that big. If I've got 400 holes, I can guarantee you I've got 400 pebbles coming along to plug those holes. So we recommend slats, because a round thing can't block a slat very well. It's still, it's your choice, but I'm going to say do slats. I've seen this done with hand saws. I've seen people run it through a table saw, and I've also seen people use an angle grinder. Whatever. Be careful. This is a pile of parts, and I usually put this up because sometimes I'll say, you know, a knife valve, and people are like, what's a knife valve? This is a ball valve. This is a knife valve. These you just pull open. They're sometimes called gate valves, but I've learned that gate is referring to the mechanism inside, not the way it is activated. So I call these knife valves, right? Knife valve, folks. Here's that bulkhead I was telling you about. I like that. Here's that bulkhead I was telling you about. It's threaded on the inside, but there's a little tiny lip right there. This is what's called a sanitary tee, because it's intended to be hauling solids, and so you want solids to flow. This is what I call a rubber boot, but this is all boot. This is really called a rubber coupler, and this is a long sweep conduit. These are very handy when you can't find a 1-inch long sweep. This is flexible PVC or spa hose, and if you've ever built something and you're trying to keep everything perpendicular, and it would have been great if my plumbing was straight, and then I could have come over here and then made it to where I was trying to go, and you start laying out your plumbing and go, they don't make a part that's going to make this corner. Break out the old flexible spa hose and just go wherever you want with it. So anytime I have a weird angle, let me put it this way. When I build a big build, I don't even ask for permission. I go buy about 20 feet of this stuff because I know I'm going to use 3-foot sections here and there. And you'll come into weird scenarios where you're like, oh, I need this pipe to go under this pipe, but I don't want to take the time to do plumbing. Just flexible pipe all around. So flexible pipe, once you start using it, and you'll never look back. This is a uniseal, and that's a pump. Okay. So to start a greenhouse, you really need a flat space. I will say this. The first greenhouse that I built, is this decent? Keep us some background going. The first greenhouse I built was on an area of land that had about a 2-foot slope across 100 feet. And for the record, a standard 1-bay greenhouse in the commercial realm is 30 by 100. So if someone said, I own a greenhouse and it's 4 bays, you would assume that it's a minimum of 4 30-foot wide, 100-foot long bays. So you can almost do your math on his square footage. Now, if someone says, I have a 4-bay, or like the job I'm going to do next, that gentleman would say, I have a 2-bay greenhouse, but they're 50-foot wide. It's like, whoa, a 50-foot wide greenhouse? Like, yeah, and there's 2 of them. Those are extremely large. You can't do 50-foot greenhouses anywhere that there's even 3 inches of snow. It just can't handle the weight. So most greenhouses are in the 30 to 34-foot wide ranges. When you get into the bigger ones with trusses, they usually average about 40 to 45 foot, but 50 is an extreme. Bottom line is, we're building a single bay, 30 by 100 foot greenhouse right here. So my first 30 by 100 foot greenhouse had about a 2-foot difference in elevation. And I was broke on a shoestring and a prayer, had no idea. I had bought a secondhand greenhouse, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that shop bench on unlevel ground like I talked about. I don't need the floor to be level. I just need all of my work benches and all of my stuff to be level. Easier said than done. I'm going to tell you, in my personal opinion, flatten out the ground as flat as you can get it first. Because then when you have to make a 1-inch tweak here, that's a 1-inch tweak. But when you start building stuff and it's 1 foot different from 40 feet away, it really messes things up. And what happens is you wind up with 1 set of grow beds on the ground and 1 set of grow beds at your chest. And so it's like, man, I really want everything at my waist. So I'm going to say, take some time and level the ground. Now you'll see, across this 100 foot, I said, all right, I've got a little bit of ground that's even, and I'm only going to fill in the low spot. And that's it. We did not import any dirt through here. This is the trench where I brought the power and the water in over to here. Yeah. I originally was going to put together a how to build a greenhouse manual for this set of greenhouse materials. Turns out the gentleman that I was getting these from no longer gets them from Mexico, so they're no longer available for me to put a manual with. So forget some of these extra steps. But basically, first thing you got to do is get a corner post built. And a lot of folks, if you've never tried to square up a 3,000 square foot building and make sure that each corner is perfectly squared to the one that's 100 foot away, there's a bit of trickery involved. And the good old Pythagorean theorem is the only way to go. But what happens when you start doing Pythagorean theorem is you can sit there with stakes and a tape measure and a megaphone or walkie-talkies, and you can tweak it to the final 1/4 inch. But the moment you start putting the post in, everything seems to change. And so what I've learned to do is don't stress over all 4 corners and then start setting posts. I know I need a post in one of these 4 corners, so I'm just going to pick my favorite corner and I'm going to put a post in it. From that one post, I can start making measurements. What I like about this picture is it shows that I've got a 2-inch post. So do I make my Pythagorean theorem measurement from this side of the post, that side of the post, or dead in the center of the post? This is where you got to start thinking about later on down the road, how wide is this thing supposed to be? It's supposed to be exactly 30 feet wide. Well, it's 30 feet from the outside of this post to the outside of the other post, not from the center to the center. Secondly, when you start strapping 2x4s and lumber on the sides of these things, it's better to use whole sheets of lumber. If it's 30 foot wide, I'd rather have either 2 pieces at 15 or 3 10-foot pieces. I don't want to have to use 3 10-foot pieces plus 2 inches because I set my post outside the thing. Anyway, with a little bit of forethought, you can get this stuff laid out perfectly. Not much to it, but to do it.
So what you're saying is you need room on the outer side of that post for the size of the wood, too, right?
Well, let me put it this way. If I'm coming across the front of the greenhouse, and then this is the side of the greenhouse, from this point to this point was exactly 30 feet. But by the time I add a 1.5 inch 2x here and a 1.5 inch 2x to the other side, it's now 30 foot 3 inches. Right. So what she was asking is, should we squeeze everything in that extra 3 inches so that the outer 2x4 is 30 foot? I'm going to say no, because our arch is what we're trying to accommodate. And when you buy a greenhouse, be it a kit or you build your own, they're usually just 2 halves of arches. Some come with 3 pieces or 4, and I'm going to tell you, they get flimsy when they do that. 2 pieces of arch, you never want to spread the bottom out like that. It makes it want to fall in on itself. And if you were to lay these out and push it together and put a tape across there, you go, this isn't 30 foot, it's like 30 foot 8 inches. Like, no, they put it 4 inches extra because they want you to squeeze it in to these pipes. And so you go and you put your arch on one side, and the guy over here is holding his pipe and it's outside the arch. And he's like, this doesn't fit. And it's like, yeah, it does. You need to push it in and put it in there because we want the lift of the arch peaking up. It gives you the strength. Otherwise, an arch isn't that strong if it isn't pressurized. Whatever. The answer to your question is no. I'm going to tell you to build your outer side of the post itself is 30 foot to the other side 30 foot. That extra is going to be caught up, like the end of your first 2x4 is going to go this way, and this 2x4 is actually going to come out and make the corner for you. And then we're going to wrap it in plastic. You'll see.
So it's 30 foot from the outside?
It needs to be exactly 30 foot from the outside of one post to the outside of the other post. And so just to clarify, and I know I'm getting a little overboard here, we wanted this box that these strings created to be 30 by 100, and then everything sits just inside of all of that. Trust me, it took 3 greenhouses for me to get this straight. And it's only ever off by like, wow, I could have made that 1.5 inches better. Or if I had planned a little bit better, I would have been a 1.5 inch more square. I'm going to tell you this, the first 2 greenhouses I built were not square at all. And I did the best I could. And I did it. I measured it, and it was from this stake to this stake. It was 105 inches and 3/4. That's what the Pythagorean theorem said to do. And I did it. But then we started setting posts, and everything moved a little bit. And so you go up with a 90, and you check, and it's like, this is not at all straight. But you put plastic on it and shade cloth and everything, and you stand back, and it sure looks plenty straight. So my bottom line and the lesson learned there is these greenhouses don't have to be spot on. They're not built to code. The master mason isn't going to come along and laugh at you, and the plants certainly don't care. So get it as straight as you can. Now in this case, this particular greenhouse came with 8-foot sidewalls that had a piece of the arch on them, and I'll show you that in a minute. And so we had to put in some stubs to get the height we were looking for. These posts are only 6 foot tall. And so if I put them 2 feet in the ground, it was going to make my sidewall only 4 foot tall. I'm a fan of tall sides. And so I told the guy, when you order another round of these from Mexico, insist they give us 8-foot walls. And we were working on it. It didn't happen. But either way, we bought these 2-foot pipes, cut little 2-foot posts, put them in the ground, and then put the 6-foot post at the top of that pipe and put a bolt in it. Some greenhouse manufacturers anticipate you doing this, and they'll say, oh, you need the little stubbies and you need the side post, whatever.
Those are all in concrete, right?
Absolutely, yes. Now imagine, this thing's a 3,000 square foot kite when the wind blows. You need some anchoring somewhere. Some folks, when they, especially in the northern climates, when they do that footer I was telling you about to block out the permafrost, they also will put their post in that footer, and so the whole thing becomes this massive anchor for the greenhouse. So, and we were putting on the corner post, we put 1.5 bags of Maximizer concrete, 80-pound bags. I don't know if you guys know that, but that's like putting damn near half a cubic foot. I mean a cubic yard. It's a big block of concrete on all 4 corners. And then per post, we were only putting maybe 3/4 of a bag, not quite a whole bag. So when I order concrete, I basically order 1 bag for every hole I'm going to drill, and then I borrow some to beef up all 4 corners, whatever. Crushed, when we order our crushed granite, we don't want decomposed granite. And so, but the decomposed granite is excellent for a greenhouse floor. I use decomposed in all my greenhouse floors because it's pervious, water can run through it. And so before my guys could even finish setting posts, I said, that's it, give me the thing, I'm spreading the thing because I can start building grow beds in this place while you guys are still working on the greenhouse. And so I just immediately got ahead of the curve and I just started flattening out the greenhouse. The floor. Max laughed. This is one of Max's favorite things. I used to have a video of me flattening this down with my truck. But anyway, here are those posts with the bend on it. And because this post is 2 foot deep, I can set the side post anywhere I want at this point. You know, I like exactly where it's at, and now I put a bolt through it. What we've learned to do is buy a laser transit. And you'll see there's the laser transit mounted right there. And what we did was while these posts are laying on the ground, I went from the flush end and I just picked the number. And I said, okay, it's a 68-inch pole. I'm going to mark 65 inches. And I just marked 65 inches on every single pole. So that when and just assume that that's where that 65-inch mark is. It doesn't really matter where the mark is. I just need each one to agree with that laser that it matches the one next to it. So all I did was pick a mark and then set my laser level to it and my little beeper so that when we set a post in there, I would have a guy down there ready with a marker and I'd have my beeper matching the line, the 65-inch mark that we made, and I would sit there and I'd find that transit. Beep, 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 beep. And then the guy would mark the hole, and then he would take that post and drill a hole through it and then put a bolt in it. And so we know that that one was level with all the rest. And I walked around the entire greenhouse, and it was like, wow, that is definitely the way to do this. We used to try stretching a string 100 foot. Well, of course, the one in the middle is about an inch lower than the one in the end. So the laser transit used to be like a $2,500 item. You can get them for $400 from Home Depot these days. Probably the best time-saving $400 I've ever spent in my entire greenhouse career, which I've only built 5 of these. Here's what, it takes quite a pile of stuff to build this thing, and although that doesn't look like a lot, we had a few of them already laying over there. It takes every bit of a 16-foot trailer dragging the ground and pushing your truck through the red lights to get this stuff home. Anyway, this is where it's starting to shape up. You'll see that we got the sides in here, and I'm going to warn you, not all greenhouses kits come with this little bent arch. Most of them, the arch goes, and then the ends bend down, and you just stick it in the post.
Isn't that seems like a whole lot harder to get your bows in?
I couldn't believe it. I thought, how are we going to get the bows in? They just went right. Believe me, they went in easier than when you have the kinked in and you got to push it in and go like that. It fights you the whole time. Right. Those, you had one buddy put it in. I may have a photo of it.
How far apart are the posts?
30 foot. Oh, that depends. Greenhouse, that's a great question. I should have touched on that. Greenhouses are usually sold 4 foot on center or 5 foot on center. It's up to you whether you buy your kit, 4 foot or 6 foot. It's up to you where you place it. If you're in the north, you have to place it every 4 foot. It's going to hold it won't hold snow otherwise. In the southern area, if they say, look, this is just going to be a shade house, I'm never really going to put plastic on this, you might as well spread them out 8 or 10 foot wide. It doesn't take a lot of structure to hold up shade cloth. We're basically trying to support the roof and whatnot. So in my builds, I always do them at 6 foot. In Southern Cal, 6 foot would be perfect. Now, what we don't have up here are the purlins that hold this thing from being real flimsy. But basically, the first thing we do is we get these side posts up, and then we put the bottom 2x4 on and the top 2x6. And then the arches you have to put together and put a bolt in right at the very top. One pipe goes inside the other pipe and you put a bolt in there. We always use carriage bolts. Let me say this. You can bend these arches at 30 feet like this. I'm going to tell you to buy a kit. If you want to know the least expensive kits or greenhouses I know of, shop Atlas Greenhouse Supply, but they're kind of lower end units, so they're really cheap. But if you want to start getting into commercial full-scale greenhouses, you cannot beat the price of the Conley's greenhouses, unless maybe John has another recommendation. Do you know of a cheaper greenhouse manufacturer than Conley's? I think everyone in the U.S. actually buys their greenhouses from Conley's and just doubles the price. Conleys, Conley's. That may not be right. I'm the world's worst speller. Okay, so here we are just bolting the two arches together. Once you've got your 2x6s on, and oh, here it is. I don't have a picture of me doing it, but I like to put a piece of scaffolding up in the middle. And because I always take the most risky position on all my job sites, so I'll be the one up on the arch, and I swear, I can barely hold it up. I'm like, all right, you guys got it? And they'll have to put one side in, and then the other guy puts the other side in. But if I'm not holding it up there, there's no way they can hold it up. So someone or somehow with a stick, something, you've got to support it in the middle while two other people put the sides on. No, only that far deepest corner. Who asked me? Me. I like to answer it directly. Ideally, you want the whole pad a minimum of about 6 inches above the surrounding ground, because as rainwater comes, you want your greenhouse to be a dry zone, you know. In this particular build, if you recall, that front corner was basically flat, and the back one needed some raising. What I'm doing is I'm gonna leave that there. I didn't want to bring in any more dirt. My homeowner was on a budget, and we'd kind of spent too much on fill dirt already. So what we're counting on is that the flat ground, when I put that first 2x4, and then I bring my plastic, and I'll show you this in a minute, I bring the plastic like this, I was just counting on the water just having to just force around it. And so it seemed like it worked out just fine. All of mine at my place are raised about 6 inches on the low side, and then of course it's real deep on the deep side. Yes, sir? Is it necessary to fill dirt? You can't use your own dirt? Oh yeah, whatever dirt you have. This was just a hay field that's been there for 25, 30 years, and I said, we can dig a hole. No, I'll call in some dirt. Just get it here. Anything you've got. And it looked like in your area, you could have borrowed dirt from 20 feet away and no one would have noticed. You had dirt everywhere. He has hay that he actually sells. And so he's like, no, you can't mess up my hay crop. Find some more dirt from somewhere else and get it here. So we did. Yeah. 2x4 and 2x6 is treated? 2x4 is treated on the bottom. Sorry, all of the greenhouse lumber is treated. But remember, never have treated lumber above anything. You don't want water dripping. But on the outer sides where the water theoretically is not going to touch the plants, I went ahead and went treated here and here. If you want to be really cautious, you could maybe do non-treated 2x6, but then I do a 2x4 on the bottom and a 2x4 on the side. But never put a non-treated 2x4 on the ground. You know, soft pine doesn't last 6 months in Texas. Anyway, I'm going to say treated. This is just me showing you where we brought the power line just right down the side of the greenhouse, because the house is about 380 feet that way. So I brought a 400-foot wire out, and this is the north wall, and all I did was bring it right here because our fish tanks are going to sit right here, and I just wanted the power right back where I need it. See if I show that. All right, and so what we did here was you just put the bottom one on, and the bottom one doesn't need to be level. The bottom one just needs to sit on the ground. Whatever the ground's doing, drop that 2x4 to it and get it there. This middle 2x4 does need to be level. This one up here is already level because we leveled the pipes when we did it, and then we actually put it on this spot. Anyway, this one's level, and here we are leveling this one. But if you're going to do it the way I do, I like to cheap out and go buy household screen from well, I'll go ahead and say it, Lowe's. Home Depot doesn't sell but 50-foot rolls. Lowe's sells 100-foot rolls. But I'll go to Lowe's and buy a 100-foot roll of 4-foot household screen, and I'll put it in this area. But that tells me that I need the top of my 2x6 and the bottom of my 2x4 to be 48 inches, not the space in between them, because then I would have nowhere to staple my screen. So with a 4-foot space between here and here, we're now leveling this. That's the best helper in the world, Tiaga. And so here you're starting to see where I took the power and I stood it up on a power pole right there. I guess that's all that picture represents. Just kind of showing you that we're wrapping it up here. These are just these regular fence clamps. It's got 2 bolts, one on each side. You just clamp it to it. I've seen plenty of folks that just use a regular conduit clamp, or just a, you know what I mean, and they just go around the pole. And they only do that where the 2 boards meet. And so say these posts are 6 foot apart, but that's a 12-foot board. So I only really have to join it here and there. Right here, they just take a metal screw and go straight through the stud, straight into the post. That's up to you.
But how do you join it there at the end?
Right here, it's kind of it's a 2-sided deal. There's a couple of holes over here, and there's a couple of holes on the other side, and you come in from the inside and you screw the metal to the board. And then these are bolts that you put around the pipe and bolt it to the pipe. Super simple stuff. I get these at the fence section. Yes, sir.
So what's the name of the pipe that's meant that you get? What would you say for that if you went to
Oh, that is part. Let me make this clear. This is a greenhouse kit that came with all these arches bent, and it came with the post. The only thing that I didn't get in the kit is the lumber and the concrete. But if I was going out to buy my own side post, in Texas we buy what's called drill stem. Do you guys use a lot of drill stem out here? Drill well stem? Has anyone here ever heard the phrase drill stem? It's such a Texas thing, I guess. Maybe you guys call it casing or 2-inch rusted pipe? Casing? Do y'all call it drill casing? And really the drill stem is the part that goes between the casings. So see, there I am calling cattle wire hog wire. Hey, everybody knows we're bass-ackwards Texans anyway. So, go get you some 2-inch rusty pipe. Cheapest you can find. If you want to do what Rob does. Or, be wise, buy a kit, quit shopping around. I'll tell you, sometimes you'll shop around for $1.80 a foot pipe because you think, I found the cheapest pipe. Well, by the time you drove 100 miles and borrowed your neighbor's trailer and oops, now you had to replace your neighbor's old dry rotted tire, but to bring his trailer back, should have just bought some galvanized pipe from the local pipe yard. Often, cutting corners costs you somewhere down the road. I don't know. I don't want to get off on that.